The neon lights of New Avalon flickered in the rain, reflecting off the slick pavement as the city pulsed with life. The capital of the Terran Republic's outer colonies was a place of opportunity and danger, where deals were made in shadowed corners and fortunes were lost in a single bad hand of cards. Inside a dimly lit bar called the Ward, the air was thick with smoke and tension. Mercenaries and smugglers seated in booths, discussing jobs, debts, and old grudges. The low hum of conversation filled the space until the heavy door creaked open, and silence rippled outward like a shockwave. A figure stepped through, silhouetted against the neon haze outside. She moved with the confidence of someone who belonged, despite the fact that she had been gone for years. Morgana, long presumed dead, had returned. She wasn't the same woman they remembered. A sleek flight jacket covered her lean frame, reinforced at the shoulders with tactical plating. Her cybernetic eye glowed faintly under the dim bar lights, scanning the room as she walked toward the bar like she had never left. Conversations died as she passed, old enemies stiffened in their seats, and a few fools reached instinctively for their weapons, only to think better of it. She didn't need to say a word. Her presence alone was enough to unnerve them. At the bar, the bartender, Cole, a man whose face was lined with experience and regret, wiped a glass with deliberate calm. His eyes met hers, assessing. "Didn't think I'd see you again, Morgana." His voice was low, careful. She smirked, settling onto a stool. "Neither did I." She drummed her fingers on the worn countertop, glancing around. Some of the patrons had turned back to their drinks, pretending to ignore her, but their shoulders were too tense. Others still stared. She didn't blame them. The last time she had been seen in New Avalon, it had been on a bounty poster. Dead or alive. Cole poured her a drink, sliding it across the bar. "Word was, you didn't make it off DRXO's, Char." His voice carried no judgment, only curiosity. Morgana picked up the glass, swirling the amber liquid inside before taking a slow sip. Word was wrong. The whiskey burned on the way down, and for a brief moment, she let herself enjoy it. A deep voice broke through the tension. "Thought you were a ghost." Morgana turned her head slightly, catching the reflection of the speaker in the bar's mirror. A hulking figure, and scarred, loomed behind her. Malin, a bounty hunter who had once made a living chasing her kind. He hadn't changed much, same cybernetic jaw, same ugly disposition. Morgana smirked, placing her glass down with deliberate care. "You sound disappointed." Chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "Just wondering if you're here to settle all debts." She turned fully now, leaning back against the bar with uneasy confidence. "If I was, you'd already be on the floor." Laughter erupted from a few nearby patrons, breaking some of the tension, though expression remained unreadable. After a long moment, he grunted and stepped back, lifting his hands. "Fair enough." He returned to his table, but the weight of his gaze remained. Cole sighed, shaking his head. "You sure know how to make an entrance." Morgana smirked, but there was little humor in it. "Wasn't planning to." She glanced toward the far end of the bar, where a shadowy figure sat alone, hood pulled low. He had been watching her since she arrived. That was the real reason she was here. She grabbed her drink and stood, walking toward the stranger's table. As she slid into the seat across from him, he finally spoke, his voice smooth and calculated. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't show." Morgana leaned forward, resting her arms on the table. "And yet, here I am." The man smiled slightly, reaching into his coat and pulling out a small. He activated it, and a cascade of data streamed across the screen. Coordinates. Security details. A name. "I have a job for you." Morgana's cybernetic eye flickered as she scanned the information. The name stood out first, Whale Syndicate. Her jaw tightened slightly, but she didn't look away. "You must really like taking risks," she said, her tone casual. "The Whale and I don't exactly get along." The stranger nodded. "That's why you're the best person for this job." She exhaled slowly, picking up and scrolling through the data. It wasn't just another smuggling job. It was an extraction. A defector, locked deep within the syndicate's stronghold on Zaros Prime. The kind of job that got people killed. Morgana closed the pad and leaned back, studying the man. This is a death sentence. The stranger simply smiled. That's why we're paying you so much. For a moment, she considered it. The money was absurd, but so was the risk. The Whale Syndicate had been after her for years. They'd love to get their hands on her. But something about the job, about the way the stranger was watching her, felt different. Important. She tapped accepting the contract. Fine, she said, sliding it back to him. But I picked the team. The man nodded. Of course. Morgana stood, finishing the last of her drink. She cast one last glance around the bar, noting the lingering stares, the weight of old grudges hanging in the air. The hum of the starship's engines filled the cramped interior of the dropship as it hurtled through the void toward Zaros Prime. The dim red emergency lighting bathed the small crew compartment in a bloody glow, flickering as turbulence from the planet's upper atmosphere rocked the vessel. Morgana sat near the cockpit, her cybernetic eye scanning the mission details once more, her fingers drumming idly against her knee. Across from her, a familiar voice cut through the tension. You sure this ain't a suicide run? Morgana looked up, meeting the sharp gaze of Orion Voss, her demolitions expert and one of the few people in the galaxy she trusted. His rugged features were partially obscured by the faint blue light of his, as he checked his explosives one last time. If it was, I wouldn't have let you come along, she replied dryly. I need someone to blow a hole in their defenses, not get himself killed before we get there. He smirked, shaking his head. Appreciate the concern, boss. To their left, Leona Roll, their pilot and infiltration specialist, was securing her gear, adjusting the tactical straps of her flight suit. I hate syndicate jobs, she muttered. Too many unknowns, and these bastards play dirty. Morgana exhaled, shifting her gaze back to the holographic display in her hand. That's why we go in quiet, get the target, and get out before they even know we're there. At the rear of the dropship, their last crew member, Darius Kane, was methodically checking his weapons. The former syndicate enforcer had a grim expression, his cybernetic arm flexing as he loaded his sidearm with precision. You do know that the Whale Syndicate doesn't forget, right? His voice was quiet but edged with warning. If they catch us, there won't be negotiations. Morgana met his eyes, her own cold and unflinching. Then we don't get caught. The dropship jolted violently as it pierced the lower atmosphere, alarms briefly blaring before stabilizing. Leona rushed to the cockpit, gripping the controls as she guided them through the thick cloud cover. Below them, the sprawling megacity of Zaros Prime stretched endlessly, its skyline flickering beneath the eternal smog that choked the lower levels. Towers of metal and glass rose like jagged monoliths, while the underbelly of the city remained shrouded in darkness, a labyrinth of forgotten streets and hidden syndicate strongholds. We've got a window before the next patrol sweep, Leona reported. Taking us down now. The ship banked hard, cutting low between the towering spires, weaving through the dense traffic lanes unnoticed. Morgana and the team moved with practiced efficiency, strapping in their weapons and securing their tactical gear. Touchdown in 60 seconds, Leona called over her shoulder. Orion grinned, slapping a compact charge onto his belt. I love this part. The ship slowed as it approached the designated landing zone, a rooftop docking platform on an abandoned skyscraper near the syndicate's stronghold. The platform had been decommissioned for years, its security systems inactive, which made it the perfect entry point. The moment the landing gear touched down, Morgana was moving. The hatch hissed open, and the team spilled onto the platform, weapons raised, eyes scanning the perimeter. The wind howled around them, carrying the distant hum of the city's chaos below. Darius led the way, his familiarity with syndicate operations making him their best point man. He gestured toward a maintenance access hatch near the platform's edge. This leads to an old service tunnel that connects to the lower levels. If they haven't sealed it off, We can use it to bypass their external security. Morgana nodded, motioning for Orion. Check for traps. Orion knelt beside the hatch, running a small scanner over the seams. After a tense moment, he smirked. Nothing explosive. Just a standard biometric lock. He looked at Darius expectantly. Darius rolled his eyes and pulled a small data spike from his belt. Let's hope they haven't changed their encryption protocols. He inserted the device into the panel, his cybernetic fingers tapping against the interface. A few seconds later, the lock disengaged with a faint hiss. We're in. The hatch swung open, revealing a dark, rusted tunnel leading into the depths of the structure. Morgana took point, dropping down first, landing in a crouch. The others followed, their boots clanking softly against the metal flooring. As they moved deeper, the air grew heavier, the scent of oil and decay lingering in the narrow passageway. The tunnel led to an old elevator shaft, its rusted cables hanging loosely in the dim emergency lighting. Leona peered down. Looks like we're climbing. Morgana clipped her harness onto the guide rail, securing herself before beginning the descent. The others followed, their movements careful and deliberate. Halfway down, a faint vibration trembled through the shaft. Darius froze. Wait, you feel that? Morgana stilled, listening. A distant, rhythmic pulse echoed through the meta walls. Orion swore under his breath. That's an energy field. Someone just activated internal security. Leona cursed. They know we're here. Morgana gritted her teeth. Then we move fast. She pushed off the wall, dropping the last 10 meters and landing in a roll. The others followed, weapons drawn as they emerged into the lower level, a long corridor dimly lit by flickering ceiling panels. At the far end, a massive reinforced door stood between them and their objective. Orion pulled out a detonator. I can get this open, but it's gonna be loud. Morgana took a breath, gripping her rifle. Do it. Orion planted the charges, the beeping countdown filling the silence. The team took cover just as the explosion rocked the corridor, sending fire and debris outward. As the smoke cleared, a squad of syndicate enforcers appeared on the other side, weapons raised. Darius reacted first, taking the closest one down with a precise shot to the head. The others opened fire, the corridor flashing with the staccato bursts of gunfire. Morgana pushed forward, weaving through the chaos, her cybernetic eye tracking targets with deadly accuracy. The mission had just become a war zone. The air inside the syndicate vault was thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burning circuits. Morgana took cover behind a reinforced pillar, reloading her sidearm with practiced efficiency. Across the room, Darius was crouched behind a toppled server rack, his rifle trained on the only entrance. Orion, covered in dust and sweat, was hunched over a terminal, frantically typing. Leona stood behind him, her pistol drawn, eyes darting between the screen and the doorway. Tell me your clothes, she snapped. Orion exhaled sharply, fingers flying over the keys. The security layers on this thing are insane. Give me a minute. Morgana wiped the sweat from her brow, her cybernetic eye scanning the room for hostiles. The vault was a maze of massive databanks, glowing, and automated defenses, most of which were now fried thanks to Orion's initial EMP blast. But they all knew it wouldn't take long for the syndicate to reroute their security systems and send reinforcements. They were on borrowed time. A warning flashed across Orion's screen, and he cursed under his breath. They're trying to lock me out. Damn it, they're good. Darius shifted, adjusting his grip on his weapon. They're not just good, they own this city. We push too long, and we're going to get buried in bodies. Morgana's jaw tightened. They were too close to back out now. The job was simple on paper: break into the syndicate's private data cache, retrieve the files on a classified Terran Republic weapons project, and get out. But nothing was ever simple when the syndicate was involved. A distant clang echoed through the ventilation shafts above them. Leona's eyes flicked upward. We've got movement. Morgana turned to Orion. Now or never. Orion gritted his teeth and bypassed the final encryption layer. The screen flickered, and a progress bar appeared. Downloading. 30 seconds. Darius let out a dry laugh. We don't have 30 seconds. The door to the vault burst open in a hail of gunfire. Morgana dove for cover as Syndicate enforcers stormed in, their sleek, black armor reflecting the glow of emergency lights. Darius fired first, his shots precise, dropping two before they could react. Leona took down a third, her pistol discharging in rapid succession. Morgana popped up from behind the pillar, squeezing the trigger. Her rifle's pulse rounds tore through the smoke, striking another enforcer in the chest. The room erupted into chaos, flashes of light and shouts filling the air. Orion ducked lower, shielding the terminal with his body. Almost there. One of the enforcers lobbed a grenade. Morgana's cybernetic eye registered the arc before it even landed. "Move," she shouted. The team scattered as the explosion sent debris flying. Sparks rained down from the ceiling. Orion shielded the data drive as the blast rocked the vault. The screen blinked, download complete. Orion yanked the drive free and shoved it into his pack. "Got it. We're out." Morgana turned to Darius and Leona. "Cover us." They moved as one, firing in unison, clearing a path to the exit. Syndicate bodies hit the floor, but more enforcers were coming. The hallway beyond was filled with red flashing lights and security alarms blaring in a steady, deafening pulse. They sprinted through the corridors, bullets and plasma rounds scorching the walls around them. Morgana took point, guiding them toward their extraction route. "Leona, the ship ready." Leona tapped her wrist calm. "Told you to give me 5 minutes. You gave me 3. I'm improvising." Not what I wanted to hear. The stairwell ahead led to the rooftop, but just as they reached it, another squad of enforcers appeared at the top. They opened fire, forcing the team back. Darius snarled, reloading. "We don't have time for this." Morgana's mind raced. They were trapped between two forces, and reinforcements were closing in. She glanced at Orion. "How much explosive do you have left?" Orion smirked despite the situation. "Enough to make them regret hiring me." "Blow the stairwell." Orion pulled 2 charges from his belt and slapped them against the structural supports. "Fire in the hole." They dove back as the charges detonated, collapsing the stairwell in a cloud of debris. The enforcers above screamed as the structure gave way beneath them. Leona led the charge up an alternate access route, blasting open a maintenance door leading to the rooftop. The moment they emerged, the night air hit them like a shockwave. Below them, the city stretched out, a neon jungle of towering spires and flashing signs. Above, their ship hovered, side ramp open. Leona tacked her calm. "Bring her in." The ship cut through the vast darkness of space, engines burning hot as they pushed further from territory. Inside the cramped cabin, the tension was thick, the air heavy with the scent of sweat and burnt ozone from their last firefight. Morgana sat in the chair, pressing against her side where the syndicate bullet had grazed her. The pain was manageable, but the real weight on her shoulders wasn't the wound, it was the data drive clutched in her cybernetic hand. Darius stood near the weapons rack, unloading and checking his gear with the quiet efficiency of a man who had survived too many close calls. Across from him, Orion sprawled on a crate, still catching his breath, a smirk playing on his face despite the exhaustion in his eyes. Leona was in the pilot's seat, her fingers dancing over the controls as she adjusted their course. "We're clear for now," Leona said, her voice tight with focus. "No syndicate ships on our tail." Morgana exhaled slowly, rolling the data drive between her fingers. "Good. But we're not in the clear yet." Darius looked up from his rifle. "Depends. What exactly did we steal?" Orion chuckled, stretching his arms. "Whatever it is, the syndicate wanted it bad enough to throw an entire damn army at us." Leona glanced over her shoulder. "And the Republic wanted it bad enough to pay us a fortune. So, let's hear it, Morgana. What's on that drive?" Morgana hesitated, then inserted the drive into the console. A soft hum filled the cabin as encrypted data scrolled across the screen, rapidly decoding. The symbols flickered, then formed into readable text. The moment Morgana saw the first lines, her stomach dropped. Project Revenant, she read aloud. Darius frowned, stepping closer. That sounds bad. Morgana didn't respond immediately, her cybernetic eye scanning through the data at rapid speed. Schematics. Research logs. Incident reports. The deeper she went, the colder she felt. Finally, she leaned back, rubbing a hand over her face. This isn't just some tech, she said. This is an experiment in human augmentation. The Republic was developing soldiers, no, something beyond soldiers. They were playing with things they didn't understand. Leona frowned, arms crossing. Define beyond soldiers. Morgana pulled up an attached report, her voice steady but grim. Biological enhancements combined with cybernetic overhauls. Neural rewiring. Genetic alterations. But that's just the surface. There are notes here about psychological conditioning. Attempts to make them more than human. To make them something else. Darius exchanged a glance with Orion. And I'm guessing it went wrong. Morgana nodded and scrolled further. The last known test subjects disappeared. There's no record of termination, no official shutdown. Just missing. And then the program was classified and buried. Orion let out a low whistle. So, let me guess, the syndicate got their hands on it and wanted to keep it for themselves. More likely, Morgana said, tapping the screen. They were trying to find the missing assets before the Republic did. Leona cursed under her breath. Which means if we deliver this to the Republic, we're handing them the keys to restart the whole damn thing. Silence filled the ship as the weight of the situation settled over them. Darius was the first to speak. So what's the play? Do we go through with it? Morgana stared at the data, her mind racing. The Republic had hired them to retrieve this. They had been told it was a classified prototype, some lost technology that had to be secured before the wrong hands got it. But this? This was something else. Orion leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. We already took their money. If we don't deliver, we're as good as dead. Yeah, Leona muttered. But if we do deliver, we're handing over a nightmare. Morgana clenched her jaw. There was no easy choice here. If they kept the data, they'd have both the Republic and the Syndicate hunting them down. If they handed it over, they'd be giving one of the most powerful factions in the galaxy something that should have stayed buried. We could wipe it, Darius offered. Make sure no one ever gets their hands on it again. Orion scoffed. And piss off the Republic? I like breathing, thank you very much. Leona drummed her fingers against the console. There's another option. They all turned to her. She gave them a knowing look. We find out what happened to the test subjects. If they're still out there, they're the real asset, not this data. We figure out where they went and use that as leverage. Morgana considered it. It was risky, but it was also the only way to make sure neither the Republic nor the Syndicate got full control of whatever was left of Project Revenant. She shut the console down, ejecting the data drive and slipping it back into her belt. All right, she said, standing. We don't take this straight to the Republic. First, we dig. We figure out what happened. Then we decide what to do. Darius grinned, loading a fresh magazine into his rifle. So, another job before the job. Orion sighed, shaking his head. We just barely survived this one. And you're already planning another. Leona smirked. Calm on, Orion. You love this. He grumbled under his breath but didn't argue. Morgana looked at each of them. They were all tired, wounded, and running on borrowed time. But they were still alive. And if they played this right, they might just be able to change the course of history, one way or another.